Awesome. All right, good to go. Sorry for the delay again. A few minutes later, but let's rock and roll. So I was really happy with when I was making this presentation. It kind of morphed into something. This was just going to be a webinar on counting combinations and learning how to count combos of hands, and like how blockers and card removals affect combinations. And then it kind of morphed into a range composition discussion, and I think that was good because I think it's a little more relevant and a little more real life. And basically today we're going to be looking into a hand example, basically looking at two ranges, a flop, and looking at how the two ranges interact with the flop and how the different combinations and what percentage of each range, as we'll get into later on. And so I think this is just going to be a really good discussion on equity and how ranges kind of interact with a board. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. It's going to get a little technical, but we'll work through it, and then we'll obviously have a lot of time for questions at the end. Hope everyone's excited for the World Series coming up. Hopefully everyone's got a trip out here to Las Vegas planned. It's cold. It has we just set a record for like 65 degrees or something. It was the coldest day ever in May. So it's not 100 degrees like normal yet. But yeah, I'm excited for the World Series to start, and let's go out there and win some tournaments. So how this came up was just I always get asked, what are some quick ways to count the combinations of nutted hands when the flop comes out? How can I use combos to determine the correct strategy? And what is the relationship between combos and my range? So we're going to kind of get into each of these topics and show a couple of programs that I use to do this. First, let's talk about the setup that we're going to be using in this webinar. All the examples are going to flow off of this setup. Middle position is going to raise to 2.5 big blinds. We're going to say these are like 100 big blind starting stack ranges. The big blind is going to call, and these are going to be the two ranges. So on the left here is your middle position range. It's about 18% of hands. Middle position, 18%. We're not raising up the deuces and threes. Fours are going to be there. Ace 10 off. None of these offsuit 10 broadways. King jack, queen jack. King 8 suited are better. And then all the suited aces and suited nines are better. So pretty tight 18% range. This would be kind of the low jack, under the gun +2. Somewhere of that nature. Big blind defending range on the right. Very wide range. Mostly suited card heavy. We're just going to be pure 3-betting like queens, kings, and aces, and ace-king. I didn't take out any combinations for bluffs. Obviously, we're going to want to 3-bet some hands for bluffs, but no hand is really going to be like we have to 3-bet this hand every time. Like sometimes we're going to 3-bet 7-6 suited, 8-6 suited, these type of hands, maybe an ace-5 suited. But I just left them in there so just to make it clearer and easier. But these are the value hands basically that we never have. The only suited hands we're folding are these really crappy 8-3 suited, 8 deuce, 7 deuce suited, folding a few of the offsuit aces, folding all this junky offsuit stuff. So pretty wide, typical big blind defending range that we've talked about. And be in the big blind range, out of 1,326 combinations, we have about 644. So this is a roughly about 50% range of hands. Roughly 50%. This is about 18%. So we'll go back and reference that setup a little bit more. But first, let's get into the basics. I have a question for you guys. You guys can go ahead and answer in the questions. So how many ways is there to make an unpaired hand? Both how many suited combinations is there and how many offsuit combinations? And how many total combinations of a way? Let's just take ace-king, for example. How many combinations of ace-king total are there that you could be dealt pre-flop? Okay, see some 16, 12 offsuit, 4 suited. Correct. A lot of you saying 16. This is correct. There's 16 ways to be dealt any unpaired hand. So you can have 12 combinations of the offsuit variety and 4 combinations of the suited variety. And how many ways is there to make a paired hand pre-flop? How many combinations can you get dealt? Correct. There are 6 combinations of every paired hand. 6 ways to make a paired hand. So the important kind of relationship you need to make there is there's 16 ways to get dealt an unpaired hand and 6 ways to be dealt a paired hand. So it is just under 3 times as likely that you're going to be dealt a unpaired hand than a paired hand. So that's kind of an important relationship to remember when thinking about ranges and the percentages of ranges. We'll get into that in a little later. So we got that part figured out. Let's kind of expand on our example a little bit. We're going to say the flop now is the king of hearts, the 6 of clubs, and the 5 of diamonds. How many combinations of king, queen are available on this king of hearts, 6 of clubs, 5 of diamonds board? Give you guys a second. Go ahead and type into the questions. Yeah, I guess it does say it on the... So, yes, you guys are getting in there. There's 12 combinations. In the slide, I kind of get on how to do it. So, there's 4 kings and 4 queens in the deck of cards. We have the king of hearts on the board. So, there's 3 remaining kings in the deck. There's 4 remaining queens. That equals 12 combinations. So, originally there were 16. Now that there's a king on the board, 25% of those combinations are eliminated. So it's about 25% less likely that someone has king queen on this king 6-5 board. So now that we don't have the answer on the slide, we're going to say that we're in the big blind and we have the king 6 of hearts in the big blind. So when we have the king 6 of hearts in the big blind, how many combinations of king queen remain? All right, so I see a bunch of 8s. This is correct. 8. So now, when we have the king 6 of hearts, there's 2 kings remaining. I guess we can't have the king 6 of hearts. We're going to say we have the king 6 of diamonds. This is going to be diamonds. Sorry, I was dealing with technical issues, and all the proofreads didn't get to go through. So, we have the king 6 of diamonds. So there's 2 kings left in the deck. There's the king of clubs and the king of spades. There are 4 queens left in the deck. So 2 kings times the 4 queens. There are 8 combinations of king queen remaining. How many combinations? So let's expand on our. Now we're talking about a singular hand. Now let's talk about sets. So how many possible combinations of sets remain on this board when we have the king 6 of diamonds in our hand? So we see 4, I see 7, I see 6, I see 12. I see 1 correct answer so far. 2 correct answers. I got them. We got a little more complicated. We got the easy ones before. All right, so we see a bunch. I see a bunch of different answers here. Let's walk through it really quick. So pocket kings. There's 1 combination left of pocket kings, right? We have the king of diamonds in our hand. The king of hearts is on the board. The only combination of pocket kings left is the king of clubs and the king of spades. So we have 1 combination of pocket kings. How about pocket sixes? Well, it's the same situation as kings. There's only 1 combination of pocket sixes left. The 6 of clubs is gone. The 6 of diamonds is gone. So there's the 6 of hearts and the 6 of spades. So we have 1 combination of pocket sixes. And what about pocket fives? Pocket fives, there are 3 combinations left. So There's 1-5 gone. When there's a 5 gone, there's only 3 combinations of sets left. So there are 5 total combinations of sets available on this board. So Frank got this one right. Jim Bushmeyer got it right. Roberto, Sammy, Jonathan Howe, a few others. So we got 5 sets on this board remaining. So having a king and a 6, if we didn't have any of the pairs, say we had 8-7, there'd be 9 sets available because there'd be 3 combinations of pocket 5s, 3 combinations of pocket 6s, and 3 combinations of pocket kings remaining. So we reduced the combinations of sets by almost a half. Now, last one on this board. How many combinations of overpairs remain on this board? See some answers coming in. 4, 6, 12. All right. Most of you got this right. 6 is the correct answer. The only overpair available on this board is pocket aces. And there, as we talked about earlier, there are 6 ways to be dealt an overpair. So we don't have any blockers to that. So there are 6 possible combinations of pocket aces available. So now we know there are 8 combinations of king, queen, 5 combinations of sets, 1 combination of overpair. You can even go further. How many ace kings are there? There's 8 ace kings, same as king, queen. So we know there's, king, queen or better. There's 16 one-pair combos, 5 sets. That's 21. Let's see, overpair, that's 27. So kind of getting an idea of how strong yeah, I didn't put the answers there in the webinar because I wanted to get you guys to answer on that one. The first one I did. So, but yeah, the recording of this will be back on YouTube. And so, the recording will be back on YouTube so you can listen back, get the answers again. So this is kind of the quick introduction of counting combinations. But we're going to get a little more in depth. This is kind of what I originally had the webinar going through, but we're going to get a little more in depth today and kind of look at the composition of these ranges and like percentages and some equity. And I think this is the stuff that's really important for high-level poker thinking. This is kind of that next-level stuff that a lot of the professionals are thinking about. So now that we have a basic understanding of counting combinations, let's go ahead and look into this example a little bit more. So we changed the board here. So from the original, the basic side. So we have that same setup. Middle position raises to 2.5 times the big blind. The big blind defends. And the flop we're going to use for the rest of the webinar is the king of diamonds, 8 of clubs, 4 clubs board. And on the right here, you see a chart that I copy pasted on here. This is from Equilab. Power Equilab is a very powerful program in order of doing equity calculations for range versus range. So here, MP2 is basically the written version of this range right here, the 18% opening range. So pocket 4s are better, all the suited aces, king 8 suited plus, queen 9 suited, jack 9 suited, etc. Same range. Here's the big blind defending range right here. These are all the hands we're calling from the big blind. And I just ran a simple equity calculation on this king 8-4 with the 8-4 of clubs in the king of diamonds. As you can see here, middle position has a 61% range advantage on this flop versus the big blind. So what we're going to do is dive into this a little deeper, look at how many combos of different types of hands that each opponent has, and kind of figure out why does MP have such a big range advantage on this board. 61% is a pretty substantial range advantage. And then we're going to kind of look into what does that equity allow us to do on this flop. So, first, let's dive into this more. I got the 2 ranges up here. Middle position, big blind. Nothing's changed. 2.5 raise, big blind defends. King of diamonds, 8 of clubs, 4 of clubs. So, first question I have for you guys. Who has more combinations of top pair in their range? So what I want you to do, take a second. We're going to look at these ranges here, and we're looking at the king, obviously. So we're looking at top pair king. Who has more total combinations of top pair in their range? Give you guys a second to think about this, and I'm seeing kind of a mix of answers so far. Big blind, MP. So, seeing big blind, MP, big blind. So, this is a little bit of a trick question, and the next slide, once we get through these questions, is going to you'll kind of see the pattern that we're going to be getting at. So, who has more total combinations of top pair? Big blind has more total combinations of top pair. So, let's look at here, middle position. They're playing king 8 suited or better. Offsuit kings down to king jack off. So they have king jack off, king queen off, king queen suited, king jack suited, king 10 suited, king 9 suited, king 8 suited. So king on the board, they have 3 total combinations of these king queen through king 8. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 combos of suited kings, and then 24 of these. So should be 39 total combinations. And then, so someone just got it completely right. Mr. Howe. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But let's look at the big blind. Big blind has every single suited king, every single suited king, and way more offsuit kings down to king 8 offsuit. So the big blind has more total combinations. Who has a higher percentage of top pair? Maybe that is more of a kind of, that's the more relevant question, is kind of the point I'm trying to get to. So now, who has the higher percentage of top pair in their range? Seeing a few answers coming in. Middle position, middle position, middle position. So that is correct. The middle position, while has way less combinations of top pair, and we're going to look in this in the next slide, the middle position player has a way higher percentage of top pair, even though they have less total combinations of top pair. And that's just because they don't have all this junk right in here. He doesn't have all this junk that the big blind has. And so even though he has less total top pair, as a percentage of his range, as we'll see in the next slide, he has a significant higher percentage of top pair. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of combo counting here. How many combinations? I'm going to add this to the slide. Let's do this one. Practice counting combos from the range. How many combinations of 2 pair does MP have? All right, so in the chat, respond. How many combinations of 2 pair does the middle position player have? So take a look at this range right here. See 16. I see a couple of. I see 2 so far. I see 2 correct answers. A lot of people saying 4. So 8. All right. So Sergey, Lewis Powell, and Jonathan Howe, you guys are correct. There's only 2 combinations of 2 pair for the middle position player. This hand right here, the king 8 suited. So king 8 suited, there's 4 ways to be dealt, correct? But the king of diamonds and 8 of clubs are on the board. So the only combinations he can have are the king 8 of hearts and the king 8 of spades. He can't have king 8 of clubs or king 8 of diamonds because those cards are on the board. So middle position has 2 total combinations of 2 pair hands. Let's look at the big blind. Let's get a little more technical. And I'm going to do it with you guys because I just added this. How many combinations of 2 pair does the big blind have? See some 4, 7, 10, 15. 12. 9, 8. I don't know if I see the number that I got so far. Oh, no. I forgot one. Haha. 1 second. Let me refigure out my answer. So let's walk through this together. I always start with the offsuit combos because those are the most likely combinations or the highest number and kind of gives you an idea of how relative the 2 pairs are. So the only offsuit combination of 2 pair that he can have is the king 8 offsuit, correct? King 8 off. He's not playing king 4 off. Big blind's not calling with 8-4 offsuit. So king 8 offsuit is the only offsuit combination. This is a kind of the first thing I always do when the flop comes out. My opponent flop comes out and I go, how many offsuit combinations of 2 pair does my opponent have? That's a huge question to ask yourself right away because, say this board was king jack 10. Well, now he could have king jack, king 10. Then he's way more likely to have 2 pair. But this board, he can only have really suited. So king 8 offsuit, there's 3 kings left, 3 8s left. So 3 times 3, he can have 9 combinations of king 8 offsuit. Okay, so now let's go into suited 2 pairs. He can have, let's write this down as we go. So he can have 9 king 8 off, king 8 suited. So king 8 suited, he can have 2 combos. King 4 suited, 2 more combos. And then the 8-4 suited. That's the worst. 8. He's connecting 8-4 suited. So there's 8 of clubs, 4 clubs. So he has 3 combinations. 3 combinations of 8-4 suited. So 9, 2 is 11, 13, 16 total combinations of 2 pair for the big blind. Yeah, so I actually made a mistake there. Someone just caught that on, Jonathan, Hal, and Sergey. I made an actual mistake there. I double counted the king 8 suited because I was trying to make the point there of the suited. So yeah, it is. There are only 9. There's 9 total combinations of the king 8 hand, 2 king 4 suited, and 3 8-4 suited. And so I did make a mistake there. So yes, it is difficult to do on the fly, Mike. It does take a lot of practice. As you can see there, I just made a mistake as I'm presenting to 200 people doing it. So there are 14 combinations of 2 pair available here for us in the big blind. Versus the big blind only has 2 combinations total of the 2 pair. Next. Who has more flush draws on this board? Flush draws, take a look at these graphs. Correct. Yep, so you guys are spot on this one. The big blind has way more flush draws than the position. So middle position has some flush draws, mostly the suited aces and suited kings. Big blind is defending almost every suited combination, so they have every single club combination on the board. And so big blind always going to have a big flush advantage on this board. And who has more nothing on this board? Who has completely whiffed this board more? Yep. So I'm seeing the correct answer a lot. The big blind has completely whiffed this board a lot. And we're going to get into this PowerPoint might go a little longer than normal because we have some cool stuff coming up that I want to show you guys. Yeah, the big blind just has nothing here so often. The big blind has 10-5 of hearts. 10-5 of hearts has pretty much nothing, just one overcard to the second pair. The nothings for the MP are going to be still like Jack 9 suited. He's going to have, 2 overs to the 8, backdoor straight draw. Basically, he's always going to have like a backdoor straight draw with his nothing. But big blind just has some real trashy equity hands. So we looked at this. Big blind has more total combinations of top pair, has more total combinations of 2 pair, and he has more flush draws. So big blind has more combinations of top pair, more combinations of 2 pair, and more flush draws. So why does the in-position player have a 61% equity advantage? And it all comes back to this first question I asked, who has the higher percentage? And it has to do with the range composition, and this is what we're going to look at here. So here we have copy and pasted this is from PioSolver here. If you put in these 2 ranges in the board, I can go into the Range Explorer, and this is kind of the composition of each range. Here. So we have the MP range and the big blind range. So let's take a look at this. First, let's look at this top pair line. So confirmed, MP has 42 combos of top pair. And the big blind has 63 combos of top pair. So the big blind has about almost 50% more combos, 63 to 42. Actually, exactly 50% more combos of top pair. But the key point here is the percentages. Middle position has top pair almost 20% of the time as a composition of his range. Big blind only has top pair about 11% of the time. So almost twice as often MP has top pair despite having less combos. Next, we looked at 2 pairs. All right. This is where the big blind does have an advantage. 51 combos of, that's second pair. Where was the 2 pair? Oh, sorry, 2 pair up here. 14 combos of 2 pair versus 2 combos. But look kind of how irrelevant 2 pair is to the overall range. That's kind of people will freak out on this board. This board comes out, oh, the big blind can have King 8 offsuit, and I don't have King 8 offsuit. And they can have King 4 suited and King 8 suited. He has all these 2 pairs that I don't have. This is kind of a scary board for me, being in middle position. We have it 1%. 2 pair only makes up 2.5% of the big blind's range. That's how wide this freaking range is that the big blind only has 2 pair, 2.5% of the time. Sets. In position has all 3 sets, kings, 8s, and 4s, 9 combinations, 4.1% of the total range. 6 combos, so only 3 less, 50% less. It's only 1% of the overall range. And so, one thing I like to do here, top pair or better. So, let's look here, MP, top pair, 19%. Over pair is another 3%. So another 1% of 2 pair. So let's do some quick fudging math. This is like 22%, 23, 27% of the time. So 27% of the time, the MP has top pair or better. Yeah, Mike, in the next slide, we're going to get into the draws. I'll show you that in the next slide. So top pair or better, 27% of the time. It's a huge chunk. So over a quarter of the time, MP is going to have either a king or overpair or a set or two pair. Basically, a hand that they're happy to put a lot of money into the pot. Big blind only has that 3.5 plus 11, about 15% of the time. So about half the time as the in position player does. And then let's count in these. So under pairs are going to be pairs from pocket nines through pocket queens. So better than second pair, but under the top pair. That's another huge portion of the MP's range. That's another 11% of his range. 24 combos of nines, tens, jacks, queens. 6 combos of each, 4 of them. So that's 24 combos, 11%. So let's add that now. That's almost 38%. So almost 40% of the time, MP is going to have a hand that is pocket nines or better on this board. 40% of the time. That's a lot. 40% versus here, under pair, he has 18 combos. He just doesn't have queens. That's the difference here. 24 combos MP. Big blind only has 18 because we do not have pocket queens, as you can see down here. But that's only 3% of his range versus 11% over here. So this is where the MP gets a huge advantage. 13, 15, 16% of the time, the big blind has a hand better than second pair versus in position 40% of the time has a hand better than second pair. And this is why the point I was trying to make earlier. These percentages are way more important than these combos. The thing you need to realize, I want to go back to the first slide. Big blind, 644 combinations. MP, 250 combinations. So the fact that MP just starts with such a much tighter range, he just is not going to whiff these boards as much. And then we'll look, before we move on really quick, the big blind has nothing 16% of the time, and then ace high 32% of the time versus here. So roughly the other half of the time, MP has either ace high or nothing. And then here, ace high or nothing, roughly 60% of the time. So almost 50% more often. And as I believe it was Mike pointed out, this isn't the full story. Let's look one more. Here we're going to look at the draws. Same board, same everything, but these are the draws. And we're going to focus on the flush draw combos here. So middle position has 20 combinations of flush draws. Big blind has 50 combinations. So like you guys said in the previous slide, big blind has way more combinations of flush draws. But let's look at this. 9% of his range, 8.7% of his range. So it's almost just as likely, even though big blind has 2.5 times more flush draws, it's the exact same probability that MP has a flush draw on this board and big blind has a flush draw on this board. And where are the flush draws coming from MP? Nut flush draws, king high flush draws. This is a pretty big deal to realize here because, on the flush completer, etc. Now, this story will get a bit more skewed. We're not going to get into this as much on this because it gets a little too much complicated, Mike. But it is kind of relevant, Mike, because let's say as we get into the strategy here, big blind checks, middle position bets, big blind calls. How are these percentages? And you guys can answer this in the chat. Big blind checks, MP bets, big blind calls. How do these percentages change once the big blind calls a bet? What's going to happen to this percentage for the big blind's flush draws when he calls a bet? So, yep, Sergey, completely right. It's going to become way higher. So, when we bet in middle position, the big blind calls, what is the big blind going to do here with his jack 7 of diamonds? Let's even get more. Jack 7 of diamonds has a backdoor flush draw. What's he do with Jack 7 of hearts? Gone. Jack 6 of hearts, gone. 9-7 of hearts, gone. 8-6 of diamonds, gone. Well, not 8-6 of diamonds, sorry. 7, yeah, you get the point I'm trying to make here. All these queen high, no backdoor, no clubs, gone, gone, gone. Basically, when big blind calls here, he's going to have a king, an 8, a 4, some type of, straight shot, gut shot. And for reference, when I say call, I'm going to include calling or check raising. He continues, we're going to say. When he continues on this board, he's going to have some type of 5, 6, 6, 7 straight draw here. Maybe he has, his weakest hands are going to be like his queen jack of diamonds, jack 10 of diamonds, 2 overs, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. And then the other group of hands, every single club draw. All 50 combinations of club draws. They're never folding. So he has 50 combinations of flush draws that are all continuing, all his 4s, all his 8s, and all his kings. So now, big blind's range is now a very, very high percentage of flush draws. That's going to be probably his highest percentage hand category once the turn comes into play. So that's kind of the next step of this process, is thinking about, okay, once he bets, and the reason it's going to increase so much is because all this junk the big blind has is just gone. He's just going to eliminate that by folding to the bet. And that's why MP wants to bet on this board, is because he just gets to fold out all this junk, and then they get to play some turns and rivers. Correct, Jeremy. Whether or not they fold might depend on the bet size, but the flush draw is going to call any bet size. Like maybe his 9 deuce of clubs folds if you bet 2x pot, but it's calling a pot size bet. We're 100 big blinds deep in this example, so percentages of hands, we have what we're gonna get. We'll wait until we get into the next part for getting to that. So same combinations on the flop percentages, but big blinds is gonna go way up, and ours is gonna kind of stay the same because, as you're gonna see here soon, it's kind of a wrap up at this point. So players always tend to think about the worst case scenario. He could have 2 pair, or he could have a set. The key is not to think of how many combinations of pairs and sets, like, oh my gosh, he has 3 combinations of pocket deuces that I don't have because I 3-bet pre-flop. Think of it in terms of percentage of range. The percentages of the range, and you don't need to be exact on this, but in game, the correct way to think about this is, so this flop comes out, the king 8-4. Immediately, the big blind called, you should just think, what is the most likely types of hands he should have? And the most likely hand he has is nothing. And then, what's the most likely type of made hand he has here? It's most likely going to be 1 pair. Yeah, he could have 2 pair. He could have sets. He could have flush draws. But those are just such small percentages of his range. He's only going to have top pair 10% of the time. And you can think about this, and we'll get into this with a little bit with what your homework could be after this webinar, is just thinking about just how likely certain types of hands are. So big blind has a wide range. Even though he has more top pairs, it's a smaller percentage of his range. So we're getting to get into a little strategy segment here. So you see the scenario here on the bottom. Big blind checks. We have that same king 8-4 club board. You've seen the ranges. You've seen the range composition now. So let's put it into practice. Big blind checks. What percentage of the time should MP choose to bet? 33% of the time, 50% of the time, 75% of the time, or 100% of the time? And what sizing should MP use when c-betting? 33%, 50% of the pot, 75% pot, or 100% pot? So answer both questions. Give you guys a second. How often should MP bet, and what sizing? So I see some hundreds, 50%. See kind of a mixing. A lot of people hitting 33% sizing. So MP should bet 100% of his range on this board when check 2. 100% of his range. And we're going to use around the 33% pot sizing. So if you were to use a solver, PO solver, where I ran this is going to be the solution. But once you learn to kind of recognize these range compositions, you'll learn why. It's going to be pretty obvious when I kind of point out a few things. And these are kind of the properties of specific properties. And this is kind of what you want to look at for when you choose to c-bet and when you don't choose to c-bet. First, equity advantage. Remember we ran that earlier? Here, 61%. MP has a large equity advantage, 61%. MP also has the nut advantage. Not incredibly relevant on this board, but middle position has aces, kings, and ace-king. And all the sets. Big blind doesn't have the top of his range there. Basically, middle position benefits from betting every hand in his range. And we're going to kind of walk, why does he, and it's because of his large equity advantage that he gets to do this. And why does MP have such a large equity advantage on this board? Big blind has nothing over 40% of the time. And ace high another 20%. So 60% of the big blind's range, this is the key part here. 60% of the big blind's range is ace high or worse. We looked at it over here. He has nothing, 41%. Ace high, another 21%. But some of these ace high are ace 5 offsuit, ace 6 offsuit, ace 7 offsuit. They have nothing going for it. Even ace 5 of hearts. Ace 5 of hearts basically has nothing going for it on this board. So 60% of his time, his range is going to, be a really crappy hand. So what does he have to do when MP bets? If you bet, he's going to probably have to fold all 60% of these hands. So 60% of the time, he's going to have to fold all these hands. A few of these hands are going to be his straight draws and stuff. So when we go in here, he has 33 gut shots, big blind, 4-out straight draw. So this is going to be his 5, 6, and 6, 7s, and like 7, 5 suited. So another 6% of those are going to be able to continue in some way with the straight draw. But kind of beside the point, just trying to there. So another reason. So first reason, big blind has nothing 60% of the time. Second reason, MP has top pair twice as often as MP. And that even goes further. The MP has pocket nines or better 40% of the time versus the MP only has it, big blind only has it 16%. And the MP just has way less nothing. So this page right here, this is basically what allows you to bet. You don't get a bet on the flop just because you raise pre-flop. You get a bet on the flop because of these reasons right here. And the larger your equity advantage, the more often you get a bet. So pretty much every time you have more than a 60% equity advantage, you just get a bet every single time. And quick lesson on range sizing, we're going to wrap this up. The more often you bet, the smaller size you want to use. So here we're betting 100% of a range, so we're going to choose a small size, 33%. Let's say the board was 7-5-4 with 2 diamonds. Okay? Better board for the big blind. Much better board for the big blind. They're going to have some straights. They're going to have some 2 pairs that we don't have. Tons of straight draws, more everything. But we still have an equity advantage. We're probably going to have, 54%, I would say, 55%. And so we're going to bet less often on that board, but we're probably going to use a bigger size than when we do. So the less often you bet, in general, the bigger sizing you're going to use, and the more often you're going to bet with your range, the larger sizing, or the smaller sizing you're going to use. Sorry. More frequent, smaller sizing, less frequent, bigger sizing. That's what I'm trying to say. So, and Chuck, in general, this is kind of true for all streets. So I see a bunch of questions. We're going to get into those in a second. We still have about 15 more minutes for questions and everything. I have to get through the poker coaching. Okay. But first, I want to get through one quick thing, homework. This is how I study. Homework. Someone asked earlier, is this how you study off the tables? This is one of the ways I study off the table. When I run a hand in PioSolver or in an equity calculation, the first thing I do before I look at any solution or anything is I look at my equities. So I'll look at the equity advantage of range versus range. And then I look at this chart right here. This is the most, if PioSolver is, I use it, but the most important tool in PioSolver is this Range Explorer. This is one of the most important tools, but you don't need PioSolver to use this. If you go to Equilab, Equilab has Empower Equilab has a free version, I'm pretty sure. You can look into it. It's not as pretty as this. This is why I like the PioSolver one. But you can look at your range composition there. And so, homework. So, for example, I'm playing a tournament at the Venetian in about 2 hours. Yeah, Flopzilla has something. Pretty much all the equity calculators have some type of range composition like this. So, what I'm going to do, like part of my warm-up routine for about 5 minutes this morning before I go play is, for example, if I want to do MP versus big blind, and I'm going to change it up. I'll plug in these two ranges, big blind, MP. And if you go into Equilab, you can generate random flops. So I'll put these two ranges in, and I'll just generate a random flop, and it's going to say 547. And I'm going to say 547. I'm going to say MP has a 54% equity. And then I run it and see how close I was. And then I generate another flop. Ace 4 deuce. I'm going to say, okay, that's a good flop for MP. Ace high board. MP is going to have a 63% advantage. Run it. And I will go through. And the key for this homework is you want to be able to quickly recognize how good of the board is for you. So you want to be able to instantly recognize. You don't have to be exact. You don't have to know if it's 54% or 55%. But you want to know, is this board a 53% equity advantage, or is this like a 65 equity advantage? Because that affects your strategy a lot. Because if it's 65, go ahead, just close your eyes and bet. Big blind can't do anything. If it's a 53%, now you need to think about it. You need to start checking a lot of hands, and you need to figure out the best hands to check and bet. So, figuring out, being able to recognize which flops are best for you right away is extremely, extremely, extremely important. And it's a great way to warm up. So when you're coming out to the World Series this summer, jump on your Equilab or your Flopzilla or whatever equity tool you use. Just start generating, like, I think most of them have a tool to generate random flops, and then just change it up. So I'll do a few in middle position. Then I'm going to change my range. This is part of the homework still. Now I'm going to change my range, my button range. And I'm going to adjust the big blind range because now he's going to start 3-betting ace, queen suited, ace, queen, pocket jacks. And then I'll run some from the big button versus big blind. And then I'll run some from under the gun versus big blind. And then when it gets really tricky, we'll start running some I'm under the gun and the button flats. Or I'm under the gun and under the gun 1 flats. And I'll just start putting in these ranges and running random flops and guessing equities. That's the homework. Practice it a lot, every day, every single day. Use it as your warm-up. That's how you get good at this. I'm not even that good at it yet. I'm off, not a huge percentage, but like there's some boards I don't realize, wow, I do have a decent size equity advantage. And the general rule is the earlier position you are against the big blind, you're probably going to have an early position against the big blind. You can probably just bet every single board often, other than like the really, really scary ones like 6-5-4. As you get to the button, though, that's the trick. The button versus big blind, both ranges are really wide. The button almost never has more than like a 58% equity advantage. Maybe he gets 60% on a few boards, but the button is the position. Button versus big blind, you don't get to see bet. Like you see bet a decent amount, maybe half the time, 60% of the time, but you check back a lot on the button because you don't have as big of an equity advantage because you have more nothing. Your range looks a lot more like this than it does like this, raising from the button, or at least it should. You should be raising a lot. All right. Poker.
I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my Thanksgiving Day marathon. I hope you enjoyed this large sampling of all of the work that I have put together for you at Poker Coaching and Poker Coaching Premium. So, if you want to continue working hard to take your poker skills to the next level, head over to pokercoaching.com/Black Friday right now. I have done my absolute best to give you the most high-level, cutting-edge content from myself and the best players in the world at a very, very affordable price. You're not going to see deals like this at all throughout the rest of the year, and I hope that you take advantage of them now. A lot of people think, is it worth spending money on educational poker material? And the answer is, well, if you're going to study it and learn from it. I have countless students who have gone from being recreational players, breaking even or winning a tiny amount, or even losing, and I've taken them to winning $100 an hour or more at 5 to no limit or $3,500 buy-in tournaments, just because they take all of the knowledge that I have taken and consolidated into my courses and my training material and the other coaches who I hired to help them and, to be fair, help myself. And they use that material to better their skills. They study it, and then they apply what they have learned from Poker Coaching and Poker Coaching Premium. So head over to Black Friday. Head over to Black Friday. No, it's late. We've been doing a marathon, right? Head over to pokercoaching.com/Black Friday now to get your membership at a heavily discounted price. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it and learn a ton. If you have any questions, send me an email at support@pokercoaching.com. I see every single email that comes in because I want to do everything in my power to help you better your poker skills and better your life. Thanks again for being here for this marathon. Hope you have a great holiday season.